Hello everyone and welcome to this new tutorial on memory. We're going to look at how to create this card flipping concept, where the goal is to find pairs and make all possible matches. This is a new, more complete and in-depth tutorial format. Hope you'll like it. Feel free to give us feedback below this video. To do this, we're going to go step by step. The first step will be to create a new project. Let's choose the name of this project. For its size, I've chosen a fairly standard web size with landscape orientation. And we're off, creating and guiding you step by step, and we'll look at all the game mechanics. You're going to learn a lot, I guarantee it. Beforehand, a quick word about PandaSuite. PandaSuite is a no-code tool for creating both interactive content and applications without any technical knowledge. It offers great creative freedom, interactivity, and playfulness to allow you to create engaging and truly personalized user experiences for a wide variety of projects. So don't hesitate to check it out. We have a tool and a free account that's quite flexible and lets you make good progress. Let's get started with this memory game. First, we'll handle the design and prepare the pieces and the home screen. Choose a background color. Let's add a title. What's great about this kind of tutorial is that it really lets us review some classic layout techniques together in PandaSuite. Let's change the font size. Now let's create a first card. Let me remind you of the idea. It's a card that's hidden. When clicked, it reveals itself to show an image. And once the image is found somewhere else, it will lock and it will... well, the combination will be made. Let's focus on this first card to understand the concept, and then afterwards, we create the other cards. In our case, the goal will be quite simple, to make 3 image combinations. In total, we have 6 cards to flip over. So, to do this, I create small cards like this one, white ones, and I add rounded corners because I love rounded corners. Great. On top, I add a question mark to spark my user's curiosity. Okay, let's choose 100. I center it. I use the eyedropper tool, which is always quite handy. We can even go up to 120. Wonderful. What's going to happen underneath? So we can even align them with each other. Great. What is under this cover? I'm going to add my images. For these little images, for these animals, I chose 3 animal images. I import them directly into PandaSuite Studio. Of course, you can import any type of content into PandaSuite Studio. Let's do the first one. It's going to be the panda. Let's hide it as it will be revealed underneath. To create this animation, where it reveals itself and actually shows the image behind, I'm going to use the multi-state component. The multi-state component, either I take it from here, add it, and put my content inside, or I have a little shortcut that I'll show you. I select all the elements that will be inside the multi-state component, and then go to the top menu and click on Add Multi-State button. It automatically takes all these objects and put them inside a multi-state component. I recommend renaming this multi-state component. Here, Panda 1. And we will create Panda 1, Panda 2, Elephant 1, and Elephant 2. You get the idea of how it works. Let's enter inside this component to edit it. This state 1 will be the initial state. I click the plus button to create another linked state. This one will be the flipped state, the one that is revealed when clicked on the card. In this state, I move the white card to place them on top. Oh, shoot! Wait, I move the card and the question mark together. I could have grouped them as well. Now create a third state. That is the locked state. There we go. In this locked state, I add a shape underneath that will appear. There, I'm going to change the color. I'll pick a blue. A blue like this. There we go. To show that it's locked and I can't play it anymore. This state only appears when the second panda is also revealed. You have to rely on your memory. Now, let's create the flip animation. Let's set the right actions. As a trigger, I select the white card on tap. It will automatically change to the next state. I configure in this. In the actions, choose tap click, interact with a component, and select the flipped state. I don't do anything with the locked state as it will be associated to all my game mechanism. We'll come back to that later. Look, we're in a pretty good spot. On click, the card is removed. Of course, later on, we'll have lots of conditions, lots of things that will allow us to set everything up and create the combinations, the mistakes, and all that. What I suggest is that we duplicate this card. There you go, a card number 2, a card number 3. We're going to move them, center them, and put just as many underneath. Okay, so we've done Panda 1. Here, this is Giraffe 1. Inside, the only difference is that instead of having a panda image, I'm going to have a giraffe image. Okay, to change image, I simply change the image source. You should know that if the new image has not the same ratio, a mask might appear. I'm going to remove the mask, you see? And the image, the giraffe, I'm going to recenter it, put it back properly. Okay. Here, we'll say this is Giraffe 2. Same principle, Panda. I change the image, I put the giraffe. Great. I remove the mask and make the image look good. Here, I create Elephant 1. Great. This one is going to be Panda 2. And this last one, Elephant 2. And so in this one, we need to change the... Okay, and reset and recenter the thing. Great. I recommend testing your project step by step. If you try to do everything at once and only check at the end, you won't know where you got mixed up. So, do it step by step. That's the easiest way. Here, I make sure my actions are correct. Each time when I click, the image is flipped. Now, what I'm missing several things. First, the combinations. How do I know when two pandas have been flipped so I can lock them? What happens if I flip the panda and the giraffe, which aren't the same? I want it to go back to the initial state, because the user should have to start over. There are quite a few little combinations like that. Behind all this, I will use a variable that will be very useful to me. I need to know when two cards are flipped and check if they're the same, if they're not the same, or whatever. I need this variable for the number of flipped cards, and we're going to create it in PandaSuite database. To create a variable like this, I'm going to go to the project level. You see, I was at the screen level, but I went back up to the project level. I add a PandaSuite data source. This PandaSuite database is a local database, so it's targeted to the user's device, but it's very practical for anything like scores, user progress, little things like that. I add a new property of type number and call it flipped cards. Its type is number and have a default value of 0, meaning 0 cards are flipped. What I always strongly recommend is that when you use a variable, at least during the setup phase, you make it visible in the interface. Why? Later on, you might see some issues. Sometimes we get contacted by users who tell us, "I don't understand what's happening." And when you simply display the variable, things immediately become clearer. I'm not saying you should keep it visible to the user, that it should appear in the interface, but for your own testing, it's highly recommended. You put it in a small corner of the screen, and at least you can make sure that your whole mechanism is working properly and that there are no errors. And there you go. It's up to you whether you want to remove it afterwards or not. So, I'm going to add mine now. Here, you see, for now it's an X. I'm going to use data binding with the database to display this value and see whether it increments or not. For the binding, I connect to the PandaSuite database and continue from there. I select this flipped cards variable that I just created, and its value, the value of flipped cards, will be displayed here. Up until now, I had an X. And now I'm going to see what it is. Saving is not automatic in PandaSuite. It's up to you to save. It's up to you to keep control of your project. Remember to save regularly. Here, you see, I'm at 0. No cards have been flipped. And what I want is that when I click, this one increments. So, how do we do that? For each card, in the same place where I create the action to change to the next state, I add an action that will increment this variable. I choose the action interact with the database, then PandaSuite database, and then create and modify data. And through the target, I look for this variable because there could be several. And for the function, I choose increment by a value of 1. Okay, let's test it just with this panda card. I have my default value, and when I click, it increments by 1 as expected. Then we do the same with the others. Tap, click, interact with the database, flipped cards, increment by 1. Once again, I'm really doing this example from A to Z, taking you through each and every step in detail, because sometimes, if you skip over even a single part of the process, you can lose a bit of understanding. Don't hesitate to skip ahead in the video if everything is clear to you. I've added chapters so you can easily find your way around. Such concentration. Flip cards incremented by 1. I save and preview. Now here, when I click, do you see? My variable has been incremented. Another thing to note, did you see when I started again? When I launch the exercise, it takes the previous value, because it hasn't been reset. You should always keep in mind when using a variable like this, a score or something else, make sure to reset it. Personally, I do it when the screen is displayed. I add another action. Again, I choose interact with the database and this flipped cards variable. But instead of the increment action, the increment function, I'm going to set it and reset it, so set it back to 0. At least this way, I'm sure that if the user comes back to the exercise, or if I do it again, I'm not at 234 in terms of value. Now it's properly reset to 0, and if I restart it, each time it's at 0. To recap, I have a variable that lets me know how many cards have been flipped. I have my active cards. Now let's create the combinations. So I create a condition to know how many cards have been flipped, okay? I'm going to use this condition afterwards to know if the right conditions are met and if the right cards are showing up. So let's create this first condition. Conditions are in the form of components because they're extremely flexible. I create a first condition that will tell me the status of the cards. This will let me know what's happening on the screen. In the check status condition, I create a first expression. 2 cards are flipped. When 2 cards have been flipped, automatic evaluation. To know if 2 cards have been flipped in my database, I can use this variable with the right function. It should equal to 2. Now I know when 2 cards are flipped, and now I want to create a condition to identify all possible combinations. Let's create another condition. And so here, this one is called check pairs. It checks the pairing association. Let's make sure that the cards are the same, that I have 2 pandas, 2 giraffes, or whatever it may be. In this second condition, I'm actually going to define all the possible situations. The first one is, there are 2 pandas have been flipped. The evaluation is not automatic because it is driven by the status, so we'll come back to that. How do I know that 2 pandas have been flipped? What indicator can I use? What can I rely on to know that? Actually, I use all these multi-state components to determine which state is displayed on the screen. If it's in its initial state, it means it hasn't been flipped. If the flipped state appears on the screen, that means this is the one the user has selected. That's what I want to know. As data source, I choose from a component. And select the Panda1 component, for example. This component exposes its own data. This information is its index. Its index is the current state that's displayed. The default state, the initial state, is the current index, which corresponds to 0. State number 2 will be index 1, so there's a slight offset. We start from 0, not from 1. So if I want to know whether it's really the component state number 2 that's being displayed, actually that corresponds to index 1. That's a bit technical, but you need to understand it. Technically, I'm going to check, is the current index of Panda1 equal to 1? And I'll do the same with Panda2. If the 2 pandas are flipped, both Panda1 and Panda2 indexes must be equal to 1. There you go. I do the same with the cards of giraffes. Okay. So, the 2 giraffes that are actually flipped, well, it's specifically giraffe number 1, whose index is precisely equal to 1, and giraffe 2's unique identifying index is equal to 1. There you go. So what's the third condition? It's going to be the elephants. Once again, here we go. The component. So that's selected. I will choose elephant number 1, the current index, right there, is equal to 1. And elephant 2, equal to 1. So I've just set these 3 conditions. But what happens next? I've defined them. Okay, I have my 2 pandas that have been flipped over. What do I do now? We're going to lock them, all right? So, if my 2 pandas are locked, are displayed, I'm going to change the state of panda 1 and lock it. I'm going to set it to locked, and I'll do the same with panda 2. The locked state is a great way to know that the user has found the pair. They won't be able to keep flipping it over forever. Otherwise, the game would never end. So I do the same with the giraffes. And I do the same with the elephants. We lock them. So we're in a good place. We have our 3 conditions, our 3 possible combinations, and what will happen if we find them. As you can see, when it comes to the conditions, I mentioned that the evaluation isn't automatic because we could end up with special cases. Actually, I only want it to trigger if I have 2 cards that are flipped over. So, if I have 2 cards that are flipped over, that was the other condition I set. So actually, I'm going to create an action. So here, I reuse the other condition. Just to remind you, we have 2 conditions. We have one that checks the association and another that checks the number of cards that are flipped over. And so, with this second association, when 2 cards are flipped over, I'm going to take the opportunity to act and check for pairs. However, I'm not going to do it every time. I'm not going to say check the panda condition, check the giraffe condition, check the condition. There is an action that is to evaluate all the conditions. I add a small delay. Why? Because normally all the actions have a delay set to 0. But here you see, when we created the action to flip each card, this action lasts 0.4 seconds. So it takes about 0.4 seconds to make sure the card has actually been flipped. So if I do it too quickly, if it's set to 0 seconds, I might end up between 2 states and not have the correct information. So I'm going to wait 0.4 seconds to confirm that. So let's take a look together at what this gives us. And so we're going to check if, when 2 cards are flipped, we can clearly see and the condition is triggered to check if they're the same, and if they are, they're locked. So I know I have a panda here and a panda there. The condition was triggered, and it's locked. Take a look at this little variable though. It's now set to 2, all right? So if I keep going and find 2 matching cards, why aren't my 2 cards locking? Aha! That's because I set the condition to trigger only when 2 cards are flipped. But my variable is telling me 4 cards are flipped. Why is that? Because I didn't create this reset action. So actually, I need to say that if I have a matching pair, so at least one condition, if any pair is created, I'm going to act on my data source and reset this variable of flipped cards. Let's start over. Now I have my 2 pandas and they lock. And now, as you can see, my variable has been reset to 0. Giraffe, same thing. My elephants, same thing. So here is the same, we're in a good spot. All cards flipped properly. It's the awesome world in which the user found the right cards directly. They didn't mess up. That's awesome. We'll show them a message. Now there are plenty of ways to do this. A pop-up message, congratulations. We could go straight to the next screen and the next activity. What I suggest is to make a very simple pop-up. So we're going to create a pop-up by using the pop-up component. Just to remind you, this area that you see me manipulating is the zone for triggering the pop-up. In my case, the pop-up will launch automatically through the user's action and because all the cards have been flipped over. It can be placed off screen. I rename it because we follow good practices and we make sure to properly rename all our elements. And here, inside, I add some text which I set to white. In pop-ups, you can put whatever you want. You can add videos, audios, of course. But in our case, we're just going to use text. Of course, you can customize it however you like. So, congratulations. Now I have a success pop-up. How do I make sure this pop-up gets triggered? How do I know that all my cards, that all my combinations have been made? We're going to go back to this status here. We already have a condition for when two cards are flipped over. We're going to create a condition that says, well, that they're all flipped over basically. So, same thing. We're going to have an automatic evaluation for that. And how do I know that all the cards are flipped over? A bit like I've been doing so far, which is that each card is in the state that corresponds to the locked state. The locked state, we agree, is state number 3. But there's an offset in the index, so the current index of each multi-state component needs to be 2. Giraffe 1, then giraffe 2. Then elephant 1. Then elephant 2. Its index, which is equal to 2. So, we have a condition. All cards are flipped. This condition is evaluated automatically. And when this evaluation is done, we're going to act on our pop-up and open the pop-up. Let's get started. Do I remember? Yes, I know where the correct answers are. So, panda 1, panda 2, giraffe 1, giraffe 2, elephant 1, elephant 2, well done. We all agree this isn't the ideal world. So here, we're very happy. We've set up the principle of the variable. We've created conditions to make sure that the same cards are actually displayed. We've even created an action to trigger the pop-up. So that's great, and it signals success. However, it's not a perfect world. And now the goal is going to be to handle errors. Let's do it again. I want to handle the case where panda and giraffe appear. What exactly do I want to do? I want both cards to reset and return to their initial state. Because those aren't the right cards. So for that, what am I going to do? For this, what I'm going to do is create another condition. I'm going to create another condition called reset flipped cards. So concretely, this will be triggered in certain cases, but for each card, we need to tell it, you are flipped, you need to return to your initial card. Alright, so actually, panda 1, we're going to do it again for each card. Panda is flipped, okay. So I define an expression once again based on its current index that is equals to 1. We're going to do the same with Panda 2. From a component. Elephant, its current index is equal to 1. Elephant 2. Elephant 2, its current index is equal to 1. Giraffe 1 is flipped. That's precisely where I unfortunately lost some crucial information along the way. Giraffe 1, the current index is indeed equal to 1. And Giraffe 2 is flipped. Just a quick word, why am I using Franglish? Because this example will be available as a template, and this template will be accessible both for our English-speaking or international friends and for our French-speaking friends here, or Francophones. So that's it. It's so you can find your way around, and that's the information that will be indicated in this template. End of the aside. So I have all my conditions, and now, in that case, I'm going to reset each one. So if elephant 1 is flipped and it's not in the place where it should be, and it's not the right one, I go back to the initial state. If it's elephant 2, reset everything to the initial state, go ahead. Giraffe, same thing, go back to your initial state. Giraffe 2, same treatment. Pandas are our friends, but still, not everything is allowed. And Panda 2, act on a component. Panda 2, wonderful initial state. So, when do I want to trigger all these actions? I want to trigger them. When there are 2 cards that are flipped, I'm going to evaluate all the associations. Alright? I want to do this if there isn't any association. So, I'm going to focus on the association side. Alright? And in the actions, I'm going to say, if none of the conditions are met, then I'll trigger the action of resetting flipped card. So first step, I have 2 cards that appear on the screen. There are 2 cards that are flipped over. I'm going to trigger my condition that will check if it's 2 pandas, if it's 2 giraffes, or if it's 2 elephants. If none of these conditions are met, then I'll trigger the action that says, okay, in that case. Is it Panda 1 that's flipped over? Okay, yes, return to the initial state. Is it Giraffe 1? Okay, return to the initial state. Do you understand these colorful and lively explanations? So let's see if it worked properly in the setup. So I have Panda 1, Panda 2, then Giraffe 1, and back to square one. Alright? But here what you see is that the action and the variable are at 2. So I still need to add this action. To do that, what I'm going to do is go to the Reset Flipkart section. And I'm going to say, I'm going to create an action. I'm going to say, if at least one of the conditions is true, I'm going to act on the database. And I'm going to reset it to 0. And I'll do the same if none are true. Act on a data source, database, there we go. I reset it and set it back to 0. So let's take a look. Not bad. we're starting to get somewhere pretty good. There you go. So we've handled the error. We've also handled the correct combinations. A little recommendation from the team. Since there are still transition delays, you see this 0.4 seconds, if someone presses randomly, very, very quickly, for example, children on a touchscreen terminal left at their disposal, that can jam the system, so we're going to secure things a bit by creating a sort of deactivation state while everything is being set up. So we'll say that this will be when the kiosk and when the memory are active. We're going to create another state called disable touch. For that, actually, we're just going to reuse our multi-state components. And you see, multi-state components, like all components, have a user interaction action. It's a property that allows you to interact and trigger actions. So actually, we're going to remove user interaction on the touch. All right. And actually, when are we going to do this? We're going to do it, so what we'll do is add it here. If two cards are flipped, you see, while the evaluation is happening and everything, we'll say, if both cards are flipped, I'll take the opportunity to change the screen state and disable touch. That way, you can't play and do anything you want. And actually, I'm still going to create another action at the check status level. I'm going to add no 0. 0 card is flipped, so this is really a safety measure. So, auto evaluation? Yes. So this means 0 card is flipped. Flipped means that this flip card variable is equal to 0. And so, in this case, if there are no more cards that are flipped, and the mechanism has reset to 0, you know what? We're going to re-enable the touch. I'm not sure if I was clear, but since there's a slight delay in the execution of the actions, we make it safe by disabling the touch while the conditions are being executed. All right? And once we're back to the initial state, we reactivate the touch. So there you go. And now we check and everything works properly. Everything is wonderful. So our 3 pairs are unlocked and that's it. So we can customize all this a bit, change some colors, make it a bit nicer. There, with the eyedropper tool. What I suggest is to add another button. So it's just as for practical purposes, but also for understanding. We're going to create a reset button at the bottom left. We will carefully place it in that specific location, ensuring it is positioned precisely where it needs to be for optimal viewing and accessibility. A reset button, basically. In case we need to reset everything. So, a question before I give the answer. How do we create this button that makes all the cards go back to 0? And all the combinations and restart the game? All right, I'll give you about 2 seconds to think about it. Did you figure it out? So to do this, we're just going to add actions that will affect each multi-state. We're just going to reset them all to the initial state. It's as simple as that. No other logic is needed. We're going to reset them all to the initial state, and that will restart the whole mechanism. There we go. Select a state. No, I messed that up. I did Panda 1, Giraffe 1, Elephant 1, so I'm missing both 2s. Act on the component, Elephant 2. Okay, simply click and tap, then act on the component, specifically Giraffe number 2. and Panda 2. So I check, so I make sure it's indeed the initial state for Panda 1, Giraffe 1, Elephant 1, and the Panda 1s. Very good. Plus, of course, don't forget to reset our variable. So let's imagine I had found a pair, I reset, and it starts over from 0. So there you have it. Now we have a simple, effective memory game that works well and is fully customizable. As you saw, you can add your own design elements, you can add pieces, you can make the mechanics more challenging, you can choose a different success mechanic. There you go. In any case, I hope everything was clear. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial format. Feel free to leave comments under this video so we can improve the next tutorials. In any case, we wish you lots of great games and happy creating. Goodbye.